This is the story of a distance most people will never travel, a distance that sits right beneath the surface of our own planet, and yet stays more mysterious than the far side of the moon. The ocean runs deep. Everybody knows that. But tonight, we are going to walk through just how deep it actually goes, step by step, number by number. And I think by the time we reach the end, you will never look at a body of water the same way again. Because here is the thing about ocean depth. We hear the words, we nod along, we move on with our lives. Oh yes, the ocean is deep, very deep. And then we go about our day without giving it another thought. The truth is, the depth of the ocean is one of those facts that the human brain was never wired to process. Our minds evolved to navigate forests, to cross rivers, to walk from one village to the next. We handle distances we can see. We handle distances we can walk. The height of a tree makes sense to us. The width of a field, the depth of a pond. Those are the scales our brains were built for. But when it comes to the kind of vertical distance that exists beneath the waves, our intuition collapses. The numbers stop carrying any weight. You can say 10,000 meters and your brain registers it as a big number, but it does not feel it. It cannot. There is no emotional charge behind the number because you have never experienced anything like it. You have no reference point. And that is exactly what makes this topic so fascinating and so unsettling. Because tonight, we are going to take those abstract numbers and make them real. We are going to start in water you could stand up in, water you have actually been in, and we are going to sink, slowly, all the way down to the deepest point on the face of the earth. At every step along the way, the previous depth that seemed so impressive, so deep, so far down, is going to feel like nothing compared to what comes next. That is how scale works in the ocean. Every time you think you have grasped how deep it goes deeper and deeper, and deeper still, until your brain simply cannot keep up anymore. That is the scale that breaks our brains. So settle in, get comfortable. This is going to be a long journey, and there is no rush. We have all night. And let us begin where all of us have begun at some point in our lives. In a swimming pool. Before we start the descent, I want to say something about why this topic matters. Not just as a curiosity or a collection of impressive numbers, but as something that connects to the way we understand our own place in the world. We think of ourselves as a land species. We live on land, build on land, and our cities, our farms, our roads, our entire history, all of it sits on solid ground. The ocean is something we look at from the shore, something we fly over, something we sail across, a barrier between continents, a source of food, a place for holidays, not our home. Every creature that has ever lived on land, including us, descended from something that once lived in the sea. The blood in your veins is salty for a reason. You carry the ocean inside you, and you always have. So when we talk about the depth of the ocean, we are not talking about some alien place that has nothing to do with us. We are talking about the place where everything started, the place where life was born, the place that still covers most of the planet and drives most of its systems. A typical swimming pool runs about 2 meters deep, roughly 6.5 feet. Most adults can stand in it with their head comfortably above water. Children splash around in the shallow end. You can see the bottom clearly, and the water is warm and bright and blue and safe. 2 meters. That is our starting point tonight. Now, 2 meters does not sound like much, and it is not. That is the depth of water you stand in when you are wading at the beach, the depth you can dive to without even thinking about it. You push off the side of the pool, glide to the bottom, touch the tiles, and come back up. Easy, natural. 2 meters is the depth at which water feels friendly, inviting, familiar. But even at 2 meters, the water is already doing something to your body that most people never think about. At 2 meters down, you are under slightly more than 1 atmosphere of pressure, not much more than what you feel at the surface. But the water already weighs heavier on your body than the air above. You just do not notice it because the difference is so small. Now, if you have ever been to a public pool with a diving section, you know that the deep end might run 3 meters, maybe 4. An Olympic diving pool goes down to 5 meters, about 16 feet. If you have ever stood at the edge of one of those and looked down into the blue, you know that 5 meters of water already looks like quite a lot. Jumping in feels like a commitment. You can still see the bottom, but it sits down there, noticeably far below you. 5 meters is the depth at which most people start to feel just a tiny bit of respect for the water. But 5 meters is nothing, less than nothing. A rounding error compared to what we are about to cover. If the ocean were a 100-story building, 5 meters would not even equal the thickness of the carpet on the ground floor. Let us go a little deeper. Let us talk about lakes. The Great Lakes in North America rank among the largest freshwater bodies on Earth. Lake Superior, the biggest of them all, drops to a maximum depth of about 406 meters, and Lake Michigan reaches about 281. These are serious bodies of water, big enough and deep enough that storms on them look and feel like storms at sea. Ships have gone down in the Great Lakes. People have drowned in water so deep that their bodies were never recovered. And yet, in the context of ocean depth, even the Great Lakes count as shallow. The average depth of the entire global ocean sits at 3,682 meters, a number that comes from NOAA and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. 3,682 meters. That is 12,080 feet, more than 9 times deeper than Lake Superior at its deepest point. Let me say that again. The average depth of the ocean, not the deepest part, just the average, runs 9 times deeper than the deepest part of the largest Great Lake. The average is 9 times deeper than the extreme, and the deepest parts of the ocean go far beyond that average. But we will get there. We have a long way to go tonight, and there is no point in rushing, because the journey itself is part of the story. The slow, relentless increase in depth, in pressure, in darkness, that is what makes the ocean so extraordinary. It does not just get deep, it keeps getting deeper, long after you think it should have stopped. Now, here is something else about the Great Lakes that puts things in perspective. If you combined all the water from all 5, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario, you would have approximately 22,671 cubic kilometers of water. That is an enormous amount, roughly 20% of all the fresh surface water on Earth. And the ocean is approximately 59,000 times larger than that, not 59 times. Not 590 times, 59,000 times. The ocean's volume sits at about 1.335 billion cubic kilometers, a number so large that it stops being a number in any practical sense and starts being an abstraction, a symbol for something the mind cannot hold. And if the Earth were a perfectly smooth sphere, with no mountains, no valleys, no continents, no ocean basins, just a smooth ball of rock, the ocean would cover it entirely to a depth of approximately 2,686 meters, about 1.7 miles. Everywhere. North Pole, South Pole, equator, everywhere. 1.7 miles of water in every direction, covering everything. That is how much ocean there is. There is no dry land on this planet. There is only water, with a few rocky bits poking up through the surface. But before we go any further down, let us stay in water we can relate to for a little longer, because there are some things that happen to you, to your body, as you descend into the ocean, and understanding those things will help you appreciate just how hostile, how fundamentally alien the deep ocean really is. If you have ever gone swimming in a pool and dived down to the bottom, you have felt it, that pressure in your ears, that squeezing sensation, that tightness in your chest. All of that is the weight of the water above you, pressing down on every part of your body. Here is the fundamental fact about water pressure that changes everything. For every 10 meters you descend below the surface, the pressure increases by 1 full atmosphere. 1 atmosphere is about 14.7 pounds per square inch, the same pressure you are under right now, sitting here. with the entire weight of the atmosphere above you pressing down on your body. You do not notice it because your body has evolved to operate at that pressure. Your lungs, your blood vessels, your organs, they all push back against it, and everything is in perfect balance. At the surface, 1 atmosphere. At 10 meters down, 2 atmospheres. At 20 meters, 3. At 30 meters, 4. At 100 meters, 11 atmospheres. At 1,000 meters, 101 atmospheres. The pressure just keeps building, relentlessly, linearly. Every 10 meters, another atmosphere. There is no plateau, no rest, no mercy. Every meter deeper brings more pressure, more weight, more force pressing in on you from every direction. At about 10 meters, 2 atmospheres, your eardrums are under serious strain. You have to equalize, pinching your nose and blowing gently, or you risk rupturing them. Your lung volume, because of something called Boyle's law, has already been compressed to half of what it was at the surface. As pressure doubles, the volume of gas in your body halves. You can feel it. Your chest feels tighter. Breathing, if you are on scuba gear, feels different because the air is denser and heavier. At 30 meters, roughly 100 feet, something strange starts to happen in your brain. Nitrogen narcosis. The nitrogen in the air you are breathing begins to affect your central nervous system. Jacques Cousteau called it the rapture of the deep, a beautiful and terrible name. Rapture, as if the ocean was seducing you, and in a way, it is. Divers under nitrogen narcosis feel euphoric, giddy, invincible, convinced that everything is fine, wonderful even, at exactly the moment when everything is becoming dangerous. There is a saying in diving called Martini's Law, which holds that every additional 10 meters of depth is like drinking another martini on an empty stomach. At 30 meters, you are 3 martinis in. At 60 meters, 6. At 90 meters, some divers begin to hallucinate, lose consciousness entirely, or become so confused that they remove their own breathing apparatus, believing they do not need it. And the beautiful, terrible thing about nitrogen narcosis is that it vanishes completely the moment you ascend. Rise 10 meters, and you feel a little more sober. Rise 20, and you are thinking clearly again. But at depth, in the grip of the rapture, you cannot think clearly enough to know that you need to go up. It can kill you while you are smiling. That is why the recreational diving limit sits at 40 meters, about 130 feet. Most sport diving organizations draw the line there. Beyond that depth, you need specialized training, specialized gas mixtures, helium-oxygen blends that do not narcotize, and a very clear understanding that you are entering an environment that does not want you there. But some people go much deeper than 40 meters. Freedivers, those extraordinary athletes who descend on a single breath of air, have pushed the limits of what the human body can endure in ways that scientists once thought were impossible. Until the 1960s, scientists believed that a dive beyond 30 meters would crush human lungs. They calculated the pressure, they looked at the volume of the lung cavity, and they concluded that the rib cage simply could not withstand the compression. The math was clear, the physics was clear, and the physics turned out to be wrong. The human body, it turns out, carries a remarkable set of hidden defenses against the crushing pressure of deep water. When you dive, your heart rate drops, a response called bradycardia. In untrained people, the heart rate might slow by 10 to 25%, but in trained freedivers, it can slow by as much as 50%. Your heart, without being told to, slows itself down to conserve oxygen. At the same time, blood vessels in your extremities constrict, pushing blood away from your arms and legs and toward your core, toward your vital organs. Your body is essentially triaging itself, deciding what matters and what does not. Your fingers and toes can wait. Your brain and your heart cannot. And here is the most astonishing part. As you descend deeper and the pressure increases, blood plasma actually shifts into your chest cavity. filling the spaces around your lungs, engulfing the tiny air sacs called alveoli, acting as an incompressible cushion that prevents the lungs from being crushed. The blood itself becomes a protective barrier. Your spleen contracts, releasing additional red blood cells into your bloodstream, boosting your oxygen-carrying capacity. Trained freedivers even develop enhanced rib cage flexibility and greater diaphragm elasticity, and their bodies literally reshape themselves over years of training to survive the deep. The current no-limits freediving record for men belongs to Herbert Nitsch of Austria. On the 6th of June 2012, near Santorini, Greece, Nitsch rode a weighted sled down to 253.2 meters, which is 831 feet, on a single breath of air. That is deeper than the height of most skyscrapers, deeper than the length of 2.5 football fields placed end to end but pointing straight down into the ocean. And he nearly died doing it. On the way back up, Nitsch suffered severe decompression sickness, experienced multiple brain strokes, and spent 7 days in a coma. He eventually recovered, but the dive shows you where the absolute edge of human capability lies, and it is not very far down at all compared to the ocean. The deepest scuba dive ever recorded was performed by Ahmed Gaber of Egypt on the 18th of September 2014 in the Red Sea near Dahab. Gaber descended to 332.35 meters, which is 1,090 feet. And here is the part that always gets me. The descent, the swimming down part, took about 12 to 15 minutes. The ascent, with all the decompression stops required to prevent nitrogen bubbles from forming in his blood and killing him, took approximately 13.5 to 15 hours, 15 minutes down, 15 hours coming back up. That is the price of going deep with scuba gear. And that depth, 332 meters, as impressive as it is, barely scratches the surface of what the ocean has to offer, because 332 meters is still inside the sunlight zone. The light has not even fully disappeared yet at that depth. The ocean, at 332 meters, is still in twilight. The real darkness has not yet begun. Let me put it another way. The deepest any human being has ever gone with scuba gear, the absolute all-time record, the dive that took 15 hours to come back from, reaches only about 3% of the way to the average ocean floor. 3%. Everything below that requires machines. There is one more thing about pressure that I want to mention, because it connects to something we will cover later. At the surface, you are under 1 atmosphere of pressure, and you breathe air that is about 21% oxygen. That is fine. Your body likes that ratio. But oxygen, which we think of as the gas that keeps us alive, becomes toxic at higher partial pressures. The critical threshold for central nervous system oxygen toxicity sits at about 1.4 atmospheres of oxygen, partial pressure, and at 1.6 or above, seizures can strike without any warning whatsoever. No gradual onset, no early symptoms. One moment you are fine, the next you are convulsing. If you are breathing regular air, 21% oxygen, that toxic threshold arrives at a depth of about 57 meters. If you are breathing pure oxygen, the threshold hits at just 6 meters. 6 meters, 20 feet, the depth of a deep swimming pool. Pure oxygen becomes deadly at the depth of a swimming pool, which is why deep divers rely on carefully calculated gas mixtures, replacing some of the oxygen with helium or other inert gases to keep the partial pressure within safe limits. The ocean is hostile at every scale. At the surface, it can drown you. At 30 meters, it can narcotize you. At 60 meters, it can poison you with your own breathing gas. At 300 meters, it can crush your submarine. At 3,000 meters, it can implode a submersible in less time than a nerve impulse. And at 10,000 meters, the pressure exceeds anything most materials on Earth can withstand. Every additional meter of depth is one more reason not to go. And yet people go. Now, let us talk about light, because light, or rather the absence of it, is one of the things that makes the deep ocean so alien, so fundamentally different from any environment we experience on land. At the surface, the ocean is full of light, blue and green and sparkling. Sunlight penetrates the water and illuminates everything. You can see fish, you can see coral, you can see the sandy bottom stretching out beneath you. This is the ocean we know from postcards and holiday photographs and nature documentaries, the ocean that appears in our dreams of tropical islands and crystal clear lagoons. And it extends down to about 200 meters. This is called the epipelagic zone, or more simply, the sunlight zone, where photosynthesis occurs, where plants can grow, where almost all of the ocean life you have ever seen or heard about or thought about actually lives. The colorful fish, the coral reefs, the whales breaching the surface, the dolphins leaping, the turtles gliding, all of that exists in this thin, bright band at the very top of the ocean. 200 meters, out of an average total depth of 3,682 meters. Think about that for a moment. The sunlit part of the ocean, the part we are familiar with, the part that fills our photographs and our films and our memories, represents roughly 5% of the ocean's total depth and roughly 3% of its total volume. That means 97% of the ocean, by volume, has never seen the sun. Below 200 meters, you enter the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone. Some light still filters down from above, but it is faint, blue, and getting fainter with every meter you descend. Photosynthesis cannot happen here, and no plant can grow. The creatures that live in this zone have developed enormous eyes, huge, sensitive organs designed to capture every last photon, or they have given up on sight entirely and navigate by other means. And as you descend through the twilight zone, the light fades, not quickly, not suddenly, but gradually, like a dimmer switch being turned down so slowly you almost do not notice it happening. At 500 meters, deep twilight. At 800 meters, almost dark. And by 1,000 meters, the light is gone. Completely, absolutely, totally. The ocean below 1,000 meters has never seen the sun. Not once, not for a single moment, not in all the years since water first filled these basins. The darkness at 1,000 meters is not the darkness of a room with the lights off, and it is not the darkness of a cave. It is something more fundamental, the absence of any possibility of natural light. The sun's rays physically cannot reach this depth. There is no time of day when it brightens. There are no seasons that bring more light. There is only darkness, always, forever. This is the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. It stretches from 1,000 meters to about 4,000 meters, and it represents the largest living space on Earth by volume. The temperature holds steady at 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, just barely above freezing, and the pressure at 1,000 meters reaches 101 atmospheres. And here is the fact I find most humbling. Roughly 97 to 98% of the ocean's volume exists in permanent darkness. The ocean accounts for over 90% of Earth's habitable space, which means approximately 88 to 90% of all habitable space on this planet is underwater and locked in permanent darkness. Light is not the norm on this planet. Darkness is the default. The bright, sunlit world we live in, with its blue skies and green forests and golden beaches and glowing cities, is a thin film on the surface of a planet whose interior is almost entirely dark water. We live in the exception. The creatures in the deep ocean live in the rule. Most people go their entire lives without ever hearing that fact, and I think that is a shame, because once you know it, you never forget it, and you never look at the world quite the same way again. There is another way to think about the darkness of the deep ocean, and I find this one particularly striking. Imagine you are standing on a clear night in the countryside, far from any city lights. You look up at the stars, thousands of tiny pinpoints of light stretching from horizon to horizon. That is what the deep ocean looks like, in a way. Not because starlight reaches down there. It does not. but because of bioluminescence. If you could turn off every human light on Earth, and if you could somehow look into the deep ocean from above with eyes that could see through the water, you would see something that looks like a night sky. Points of light, millions of them, billions of them, moving through the darkness. Blue lights and green lights and white lights, flashing and pulsing and glowing. Every light is a creature. Every flash is a signal, a warning, a lure, a conversation. The deep ocean has its own night sky, and it is alive. Between 200 and 1,000 meters, roughly 80% of the creatures make their own light. In some groups, like the cnidarians, it is virtually 100%. These creatures have been producing light in the darkness for many years. We think of darkness as empty, as absence, as nothing. But in the deep ocean, darkness is full. It is teeming. It is the medium through which an entire world communicates. Now, let us go deeper. Let us leave the world of light behind and sink through the ocean, step by step, layer by layer, and see what we find at each level. And as we do, I want you to pay attention to how your intuition responds, because at some point, the numbers will stop making sense. The depth will exceed what your brain can process. And that is the moment when you will understand why this video is called the scale that breaks our brains. We start at the surface, 0 meters, 1 atmosphere, warm water, bright sunlight, waves rolling overhead. This is the world we know. At 10 meters, the pressure has doubled to 2 atmospheres. A recreational snorkeler might dive to this depth. Your ears pop, and the sunlight is still bright, still warm on your skin through the water. At 40 meters, the recreational diving limit, 5 atmospheres. You can still see light above you, but the colors have started to shift. Red light gets absorbed first, then orange, then yellow, and the world becomes increasingly blue, then increasingly dim. In nitrogen narcosis terms, you are 4 martinis deep. You should not be here without training. At 100 meters, we pass the limit where most free divers black out. 11 atmospheres. Your lungs, if you were holding your breath, would be compressed to about 1/9 of their surface volume, roughly the size of a clenched fist. The light is dim now, twilight at best. And here is something not many people know. At this depth, the very air you breathe turns poisonous. Oxygen, at the partial pressures found at 100 meters, becomes toxic to the central nervous system, and it can cause seizures with no warning whatsoever, no build-up, no early symptoms. One moment you are fine, the next you are convulsing, and nitrogen, of course, is making you hallucinate. The very air that keeps you alive at the surface turns against you down here. The sea is not inviting you to stay. At 200 meters, we leave the sunlight zone behind. From here on, nothing grows from light. 300 meters puts us at the typical operating depth of a military submarine, with steel hulls groaning and every weld under enormous stress. Exact crush depths are classified, but most modern attack submarines would be destroyed between 700 and 900 meters. The engineers who design these vessels calculate the absolute limits and operate well within them, because at these depths, there is no margin for error, no rescue, no swimming to the surface. If the hull fails, the ocean wins. Instantly, and we know the ocean wins sometimes. The USS Thresher went down on the 10th of April 1963 with 129 souls aboard, believed to have imploded between 400 and 730 meters, and that disaster created the SubSafe program. The USS Scorpion was lost on the 22nd of May 1968, with 99 crew found at 3,000 meters. The Argentine submarine Ara San Juan disappeared on the 15th of November 2017, with 44 aboard, found at 907 meters, split into 3 pieces. The Indonesian submarine KRI Nanggala was lost on the 21st of April 2021, with 53 crew, found at approximately 850 meters. Every one of these losses carries the same lesson. The deep ocean is not a place for human beings. We visited inside machines, inside cocoons of metal and glass and engineering, and even then, the margin between survival and catastrophe is measured in millimeters of steel. Now, saturation diving deserves a mention here because it represents the furthest that any human being has gone into the deep ocean without a submersible. Not free diving, not scuba. Saturation diving. Saturation diving is a technique used primarily in the offshore oil and gas industry, and the basic idea works like this. When a diver stays at depth long enough, the body's tissues become fully saturated with the breathing gases at that pressure. Once saturated, the decompression time required to return to the surface does not increase, no matter how much longer the diver stays down. So, instead of making short dives with long decompressions, saturation divers live at pressure for weeks at a time, working in the deep water during the day and returning to a pressurized habitat at night. They decompress only once, at the end of the job, and the rule of thumb is roughly 1 day of decompression for every 100 feet of depth, plus 1 additional day. The deepest experimental saturation dive in history was carried out by the French company Comex in 1992. Divers reached a simulated depth of 701 meters in a pressurized chamber, about 2,300 feet, breathing a mixture of hydrogen, helium, and a tiny amount of oxygen. Their voices were distorted beyond recognition by the gas mixtures, and their reaction times were slowed, but they survived. They proved that, with extraordinary care and extraordinary engineering, the human body can exist at pressures that would have seemed impossible a few decades earlier. But 701 meters in a pressurized chamber on the surface is as far as we have ever pushed it. In the actual ocean, commercial saturation divers typically work at depths of 100 to 300 meters. Anything deeper requires submersibles, and anything much deeper than 1,000 meters requires submersibles built to tolerances that make aerospace engineering look casual. The deep ocean, beyond a few hundred meters, is simply not a place for unprotected human beings. Our bodies were not designed for it. Our lungs, our blood, our bones, our nervous systems all evolved for one atmosphere of pressure, for warm air, for sunlight. Everything about us is wrong for the deep ocean, and yet we keep going back. That, I think, says something about us as a species. We are not built for the deep, but we go anyway. 500 meters now, deeper than any military submarine would normally operate. The darkness is total. The cold is penetrating, 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, and the Titanic is still far, far below us. The wreck of the RMS Titanic lies at approximately 3,800 meters below the surface of the North Atlantic, which is 12,500 feet, and the pressure at that depth reaches approximately 381 atmospheres, roughly 5,600 pounds per square inch. Let us try to make that real. The Empire State Building, from ground to antenna tip, stands about 443 meters tall. You would need roughly 8.5 of them stacked on top of each other to reach the Titanic. The Eiffel Tower comes in at about 330 meters, so you would need roughly 11.5 of those. The Titanic sank on the night of the 14th of April 1912, and when it went under, its bow section plunged at about 56 kilometers per hour. Reaching the bottom took roughly 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes of falling through blackness, through cold, through pressure building every second. When it arrived in a world so utterly different from the one it left that it might as well have landed on another planet. And here is a surprising fact. The Titanic sits at roughly the average depth of the ocean. The global average is 3,682 meters, and the Titanic rests at about 3,800. That depth, the depth that seems so extreme, is actually just what the ocean floor looks like in a typical spot. Not a trench, not an abyss, just ordinary ocean floor. And that ordinary floor is deeper than 8 Empire State Buildings, darker than any cave on Earth, colder than your refrigerator, and under pressures that would kill a human being faster than the brain could process what was happening. We know that last part with terrible certainty because of the Titan submersible. On the 18th of June 2023, a submersible called Titan, operated by OceanGate Expeditions based in Everett, Washington, began its descent toward the wreck of the Titanic with 5 people on board. Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, and the pilot, age 61. Paul-Henri Narguillet, a French deep-sea explorer who had visited the Titanic more times than anyone and was known as Mr. Titanic, age 77. Hamish Harding, a British businessman and adventurer, age 58. Shahzada Dawood, a Pakistani-British businessman, age 48. And Suleiman Dawood, Shahzada's son, just 19 years old. The Titan stood apart from other deep-diving submersibles in one critical way. Most use solid titanium or steel pressure spheres, but the Titan used a hull of carbon fiber composite with titanium end caps. Engineers and industry experts had questioned this design before the fatal dive, and those concerns proved well-founded. Approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes into the descent, at a depth of approximately 3,363 meters, the hull failed catastrophically. The implosion happened in less than 20 milliseconds. A human brain takes approximately 100 milliseconds to process a pain signal, which means the implosion occurred 5 times faster than the nervous system can register pain. There was no fear, no awareness, no experience of what was happening. There was simply existence, and then nothing, in less time than it takes to blink. The debris field covered approximately 30,000 square meters of the seafloor, roughly 500 meters from the Titanic's bow. The United States Coast Guard released its final report on the 5th of August, 2025, calling it a preventable tragedy driven by critically flawed safety practices, a toxic workplace culture at OceanGate, and the personal negligence of Stockton Rush. The report stated that had Rush survived, a criminal investigation would have been recommended. The Titan disaster reminded millions of people just how dangerous the deep ocean is. The Titan was not heading to the deepest part of the ocean. It was heading to a depth of about 3,800 meters. Average depth, ordinary, and it could not survive even that. And the depth that destroyed the Titan is not even halfway to the bottom of the deepest ocean trenches. The ocean goes much further down. The pressure gets much greater. Let me take a moment here to talk about something that is easy to overlook, but worth understanding: the relationship between the ocean and time. When the Titanic sank in 1912, its wreckage came to rest at 3,800 meters, and it has been there now for over a century. In that time, the ocean has not been gentle with it. Rusticles, formations of iron oxide created by iron-eating bacteria, cover the hull like frozen waterfalls of rust, and the ship is slowly being consumed by microbial life. Scientists estimate that the Titanic will be completely gone within the next few decades, eaten by organisms so small you cannot see them, at a depth so great you cannot reach it, without millions of dollars of equipment. The ocean will erase it, slowly, patiently, the way it erases everything eventually. And the ocean is old, far older than anything on land. The oldest ocean water, the water in the deepest parts of the thermohaline circulation that has been traveling along the ocean floor for centuries, sank near Greenland and Iceland and has been slowly making its way south, then east, then north again. That water has been on its journey for over 1,000 years, part of the surface ocean when the Vikings were sailing, and now it sits at the bottom of the Pacific, still moving, still flowing, at about 1 centimeter per second, slower than a snail, but relentless. The deep ocean floor itself is covered in sediment that has been accumulating for thousands of years, and in some places, the sediment runs kilometers thick. It is a record of everything that has ever lived and died in the water above. Every creature that ever sank, every particle of dust that ever drifted from the continents, every volcanic eruption that ever sent ash into the atmosphere, it all settled, eventually, to the bottom. The ocean floor is the longest continuous record of life on Earth, and most of it has never been read. Below 4,000 meters, we enter the abyssopelagic zone, the abyss. It covers roughly 75% of the entire ocean floor. Temperature between 0 and 3 degrees Celsius. Pressure from about 400 to 600 atmospheres. No light. There has never been light. The only illumination in this entire world comes from the creatures that live here, creatures that make their own bioluminescence. And it is not rare. According to a 2017 study by Martini and Haddock at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, approximately 76% of all deep-sea animals produce their own light. In waters between 200 and 1,000 meters, that figure climbs to 80%. Among cnidarians, the group including jellyfish, 97 to 99.7% are bioluminescent. The ability to make light has evolved independently at least 40 times across the tree of life, and NOAA has described bioluminescence as potentially the most common form of communication on the planet. We live in a world of sunshine and streetlights and screens. But for most living creatures on this planet, the only light they will ever know is the light they make themselves, in the dark, at the bottom of the sea. I find that one of the most haunting and beautiful facts I have ever learned. Now, let me introduce you to some of these creatures. The anglerfish. Females carry a bioluminescent lure on a modified dorsal spine called the esker, which glows thanks to bacteria that live inside it. The lure dangles in front of the anglerfish's enormous, tooth-filled mouth, attracting prey in the darkness. But the truly extraordinary thing about anglerfish is the males. In some species, the males are tiny, as small as 6.2 millimeters at maturity, and when a male finds a female in the vast darkness, he bites into her body and never lets go. Over time, his tissues fuse with hers, his circulatory system merges with hers, and his organs atrophy until he becomes nothing more than a parasitic sperm bank. His immune system lacks the components that would cause rejection, biologically designed to lose himself in her. The anglerfish represents one of the most extreme examples of sexual dimorphism in the animal kingdom. The barrel-eye fish, a completely transparent, fluid-filled dome for a head with two barrel-shaped eyes inside that can rotate, pointing up to scan for silhouettes of prey or forward to aim at food. Scientists first described the barrel eye in 1939, but the transparent head was not understood until 2009, when researchers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute filmed a live specimen. Every previous specimen had been caught in nets, and the delicate dome had always been destroyed on the way up. For 70 years, we were looking at broken specimens and did not know it. The giant squid, up to 13 meters in total length, with eyes up to 25 centimeters in diameter, not photographed alive in its habitat until 2004, and not filmed alive until 2012. For centuries, the giant squid lived as a myth, a sea monster story, and it turned out to be real. It just lived where we could not go. The colossal squid, the heaviest known invertebrate, up to 495 kilograms, with eyes up to 37 centimeters, the largest eyes ever measured in any animal. The Schmidt Ocean Institute filmed it alive for the first time on the 9th of March, 2025, at about 600 meters near the South Sandwich Islands, less than a year ago. The largest invertebrate on the planet, and we only just saw it alive. The xenophyophores, giant single-celled organisms over 10 centimeters across, whose protoplasm makes up less than 1% of their mass. They concentrate heavy metals including uranium, barium, lead, and mercury, and they have been found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a single cell at the deepest point on Earth, concentrating uranium. Let me tell you about one more creature, because I think it deserves its own moment. The Dumbo octopus. named for its ear-like fins that resemble the ears of Disney's Dumbo the elephant. These octopuses live at extreme depths, and in 2020, one was observed at 6,957 meters in the Java Trench, the deepest any cephalopod, any member of the octopus and squid family, has ever been recorded. That sighting also marked the first cephalopod confirmed in the Hadal Zone, below 6,000 meters. Dumbo octopuses do not change color the way shallow water octopuses do, because they do not need to. There is no light to see color by. They drift through the darkness, flapping their ear-like fins gently, looking for small crustaceans and worms on the ocean floor. Among the most graceful and peaceful-looking creatures in the deep ocean, living in one of the most extreme environments on the planet. I mention the Dumbo octopus because I think it captures something about the deep ocean that often gets lost. We imagine the deep as a place of horror, of crushing pressure and alien monsters and teeth and darkness. And there is some truth to that. The anglerfish with its ghastly lure, the gulper eel with its unhinging jaw. These are the creatures that fill the scary documentaries and the viral videos. But there is also beauty down there. Quiet, gentle, strange beauty. Dumbo octopuses drifting through the dark. Bioluminescent jellyfish pulsing with blue light. Marine snow falling like stars. Whale falls blooming with life. The deep ocean is not just terrifying, it is also, in its own alien way, breathtaking. The deep ocean has one more zone to go, the deepest, named after the underworld itself. Below 6,000 meters, we enter the hadopelagic zone, the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. This is where the ocean trenches are, those narrow, plunging gashes in the Earth's crust where one tectonic plate is being forced beneath another. About 30 major trenches. Pressure from 600 to 1,000. 100 atmospheres. Temperature 1 to 4 degrees Celsius. Almost no food except marine snow settling at 100 to 200 meters per day, taking weeks to reach the bottom from the surface. Despite all of that, about 400 known species live here. Amphipods exhibiting gigantism, growing to 17 to 30 centimeters. Bacterial mats, polychaete worms. Foraminifera that build soft shells from organic polymers because calcium carbonate dissolves under the pressure. Sea cucumbers. The deepest fish ever found is a Pseudoliparus snailfish, filmed at 8,336 meters in the Izu Ogasawara Trench on the 15th of August, 2022, by Professor Alan Jameson. 5 days later, 2 specimens were caught at 8,022 meters in the Japan Trench, the first fish ever caught below 8,000 meters. These snailfish have no swim bladder. Their bodies are gelatinous, almost translucent, and their skeletons are flexible. Scientists estimate the theoretical maximum depth for any fish is 8,200 to 8,400 meters, and beyond that, fish biochemistry fails. Now, let me tell you about the deepest diving mammals, because the ocean's greatest explorers were not human. Cuvier's beaked whale holds the record at 2,992 meters in 2014, nearly 10,000 feet, on a single breath. The same study recorded the longest mammalian dive at 222 minutes, 3 hours, and 42 minutes without breathing. Sperm whales routinely dive to 600 to 1,000 meters, with a maximum recorded depth of about 2,250 meters. Their rib cages collapse intentionally under pressure, and their heart rate drops to as few as 2 beats per minute. But even the deepest whale cannot reach the Hadal Zone. To go all the way down, you need a machine. There is something else about the Hadal Zone worth considering. The trenches are not just deep, they are narrow. The Mariana Trench stretches 2,550 kilometers long, but only about 69 kilometers wide, which means it is roughly 37 times longer than it is wide. If you scaled it down to the size of a bathtub, the trench would look like a razor cut in the bottom, and the creatures that live in these trenches are often found nowhere else. The Hadal Zone is not one environment, it is dozens of separate environments, isolated from each other by thousands of kilometers of ordinary ocean floor. Each trench functions like an island, separated not by water, but by depth. The amphipods at the bottom of the Mariana Trench are genetically different from the amphipods at the bottom of the Tonga Trench, even though both live at similar depths and in similar conditions. That is what makes the Hadal Zone so scientifically fascinating. It is not one ecosystem, it is an archipelago of ecosystems, each one unique, each one adapted to its own particular set of conditions, and most of them barely studied. We have sampled a handful of these trenches, sent cameras and submersibles to a few, but the majority remain unknown. What lives in the deepest parts of the Philippine Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Peru-Chile Trench? We have only the faintest idea, and yet, microplastics have been found in all of them. Before we even knew what lived there, we had already contaminated it. William Beebe and Otis Barton built the bathysphere, a hollow steel ball, 4.75 feet across, walls 1.5 inches thick, weighing 5,000 pounds. On the 11th of June, 1930, off Bermuda, they descended to 417 meters, the first deep exploration dive in history. Over 4 years, they went deeper. On the 22nd of September, 1932, they reached 671 meters and made the first live undersea radio broadcast on NBC. On the 15th of August, 1934, they reached 923 meters, 3,028 feet, half a mile down. With every inch of cable unwound, there was literally no more rope. That record of 923 meters stood for 15 years, but what Beebe and Barton had accomplished went beyond a depth record. They had proven something that many people doubted, that there was life in the deep ocean. Real life. Strange, alien, bioluminescent life, but life all the same. Before the bathysphere, serious scientists debated whether anything could survive below a few hundred meters. The pressure was too great, they argued, the cold too extreme, the darkness too complete. Surely, nothing could live there. Beebe proved them wrong. And the creatures he saw through those tiny quartz windows were just the beginning. The ocean was full of life, all the way down, in every direction, in every condition that the most pessimistic scientist could imagine. The ocean, it turned out, was not dead in its depths. It was teeming, and we had simply never bothered to look. Beebe wrote afterward that the only other place comparable to these marvelous nether regions must surely be naked space itself, out far beyond atmosphere, between the stars. The bathysphere's record held for 15 years. On the 23rd of January, 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in the bathyscaphe Trieste to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The pressure sphere measured 2.16 meters across, made of 127 millimeters of Krupp steel, and the descent took 4 hours and 47 minutes. At about 9,000 meters, an outer plexiglass window cracked. The vessel shuddered. They continued. They touched bottom at 10,916 meters, approximately 1,100 atmospheres, and spent 20 minutes down there. Piccard reported seeing what he called some type of flatfish, though modern scientists believe it was likely a sea cucumber, since the theoretical maximum depth for fish sits well above that depth. The ascent took 3 hours and 15 minutes. For 52 years, nobody went back. On the 26th of March, 2012, James Cameron descended solo in the Deep-Sea Challenger to 10,908 meters. The descent took 2 hours and 36 minutes. He spent about 3 hours on the bottom, and the ascent lasted 70 minutes. 68 new species came back with him. Now let me say a few words about what it actually feels like to descend to the bottom of the ocean. Not the facts and the numbers, but the feeling, because I think that matters too. James Cameron described it vividly. After leaving the surface, within 3 minutes, at about 450 meters, the light disappears completely. From that point on, you are falling through total blackness with nothing to see outside the viewport. No sense of motion, no landmarks, no reference points. Just the instruments telling you that you are going down, and the gradual ticking up of the depth gauge. The descent to Challenger Deep takes more than 2 hours. 2 hours of sitting in a space barely large enough to turn around in, watching numbers change on screens, listening to the sounds of the vessel, and knowing that outside, in every direction, there is nothing but black water and crushing pressure. The vessel creaks and groans as the hull adjusts to the increasing load. The temperature drops, and you feel the cold through the walls. And then, after hours of falling, the sonar shows the bottom approaching. The sediment comes into view in the lights, soft, grey, featureless, like a desert made of the finest powder imaginable. And you are there, at the bottom, the lowest point on the surface of the Earth. Below you is rock. Below the rock is mantle. Below the mantle is the core of the planet. You are as close to the center of the Earth as any human being has ever been while remaining on the surface. Piccard, in 1960, described the bottom as looking like a vast, empty, flat, beige wasteland. Cameron, in 2012, called it very lunar, saying you do not expect a profusion of life, and described it as desolate, stark, and beautiful in its emptiness. And yet, even there, life persisted. Tiny amphipods, foraminifera, bacterial mats. Even at 10,935 meters, the ocean is not completely empty. Life finds a way. It always finds a way, and when you begin the ascent, releasing the ballast, the vessel rises, slowly at first, then faster. The depth gauge counts down, the pressure eases, and after an hour or more of rising, the first hint of blue appears above. The light returns, the world comes back. You surface into the sunshine and the wind and the waves, and you look out at the flat, calm ocean, and you know that beneath you, right now, the darkness extends for miles. Walsh, who was 28 years old when he descended in the Trieste, described the emotional impact simply. Looking at the ocean afterward was never quite the same, he said, because once you have been to the bottom, you know what is down there. You know the scale, you know the pressure, you know the darkness, and you can never unknow it. His first words from the bottom were these: I am on the bottom. Depth is 35,756 feet. Life support is good. Everything looks good. He later put it this way: when you leave the surface, it starts to get dark very quickly. By 3 minutes into the dive, I am at about 1,500 feet and zero light. So from then on, you are in free fall in complete blackness. Free fall in complete blackness for 2.5 hours, alone, down. Victor Vescovo completed the 5 Deeps expedition between December 2018 and August 2019, using the DSV limiting factor, a Triton 36,000 halves, the world's first commercially certified full ocean depth submersible with a titanium hull. Puerto Rico Trench, Atlantic, 8,376 meters. South Sandwich Trench, Southern Ocean, 7,434 meters. Java Trench, Indian Ocean, 7,192 meters. Challenger Deep, the 28th of April, 2019, 10,928 meters, the deepest crewed dive in history. Malloy Deep, Arctic, 5,550 meters. Vescovo became the first person to visit the deepest point in all 5 oceans, completing 15 total dives to Challenger Deep through July 2022. Along the way, he discovered the world's 2 deepest shipwrecks, the USS Johnston at 6,456 meters and the USS Samuel B. Roberts at 6,895 meters. And in June 2022, he flew to space on Blue Origin, becoming the first person to summit Everest, dive Challenger Deep, and visit space. On the 10th of November 2020, China's Fenduzi descended to 10,909 meters with a 3-person crew, the largest to reach Challenger Deep, and broadcast the first live-streamed video from the bottom. As of January 2025, the Fenduzi had completed 329 total dives, the most of any deep ocean submersible globally. As of July 2022, approximately 27 people had reached Challenger Deep, 27 in all of human history. More than 642 people have traveled to space, 12 walked on the moon, over 4,000 climbed Everest, 27 reached the deepest point on their own planet. Dr. Catherine D. Sullivan, first American woman to spacewalk, the 11th of October 1984, descended to Challenger Deep on the 7th of June 2020. After surfacing, she called the astronauts aboard the ISS, connecting the deepest and highest points of human presence simultaneously, and remains the only person to have both spacewalked and visited the bottom of the ocean. Now let us talk about Challenger Deep, because this is where our journey ends. At the very bottom of the world, Challenger Deep sits within the Mariana Trench, about 200 miles southwest of Guam. The trench stretches approximately 2,550 kilometers long and 69 kilometers wide, formed by the Pacific Plate subducting beneath the Mariana Plate. The measurement history tells the story of improving technology. HMS Challenger in 1875 lowered a weighted rope and got 8,184 meters, and both thermometers were crushed. HMS Challenger II in 1951 used an echo sounder and recorded 10,863 meters. The Soviet vessel Vityaz in 1957 returned a figure of 11,034 meters, now considered an overestimate. Trieste in 1960 measured 10,916 meters. Japan's Kaiko in 1995 recorded 10,911 meters. WHOI's Nereus in 2009 got 10,902 meters. Cameron in 2012 reached 10,908 meters. Vescovo in 2019 hit 10,928 meters. China's Fenduzi in 2020 recorded 10,909 meters. The most precise measurement came in 2021, published by Greenaway and colleagues in Deep Sea Research Part 1, using submersible transect data. 10,935 meters, plus or minus 6 meters, at 95% confidence. NOAA endorsed. 10,935 meters. Let us make that real. Mount Everest stands at 8,849 meters. Placed at the bottom of Challenger Deep, 2,086 meters of water would still cover its peak, more than a mile of ocean above the tallest mountain on Earth. The mountain that kills experienced climbers, that requires weeks of acclimatization, would be invisible, completely submerged, lost beneath the sea. Pressure at the bottom reaches approximately 1,100 atmospheres, 15,750 pounds per square inch, sometimes described as 50 jumbo jets stacked on a single person, or 8 tons per square inch. Styrofoam cups, roughly 90% air, shrink to thimble size at this depth, a perfect miniature, a tangible demonstration of what the deep ocean does to anything containing gas, including a human body. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, because I think we have been moving quickly, and some of what we have covered deserves a little more time to settle in. We have just reached the bottom of the ocean, 10,935 meters. And the temptation at this point is to rush onward, to start talking about what else is down there, what else we have found, what else we do not know. But I think it is worth staying at the bottom for a moment, just sitting with it, Because here is what strikes me about Challenger Deep. It is not just the depth, and it is not just the pressure. It is the contrast between how close it is and how impossible it feels. Challenger Deep sits about 200 miles from Guam. You can fly to Guam. You can book a hotel room on Guam. You can eat breakfast on Guam and look out at the Pacific Ocean, and somewhere out there, beneath that calm blue surface, lies the deepest point on Earth. Not on another continent, not behind an ice wall, not on the dark side of the moon. A few hours by boat from a place with an international airport and a Denny's. And yet only 27 people have been there, in all of human history. Getting to the International Space Station would be easier in practical terms, and certainly cheaper. The deep ocean is the most inaccessible place on our own planet, not because it is far away, but because it is far down. Let me also take a moment to talk about the average ocean depth, because I think that number deserves more attention than we usually give it. 3,682 meters. We have said it several times tonight, but I want you to think about what that means in terms of your daily life. If you were to drive your car at highway speed, say 100 kilometers per hour, and point it straight down into the ocean, it would take you about 2 minutes and 13 seconds to reach the average ocean floor. 2 minutes. That is how deep the average ocean runs. You could hold your breath for the entire descent and still have time left, except that by the time you reach the bottom, the pressure would have crushed your car and you into something unrecognizable. If you were to drop a bowling ball off a ship, it would take roughly 11 to 12 minutes to reach the average depth, sinking at about 5 to 6 meters per second. A bowling ball, one of the densest common objects most people have handled, needs 12 minutes to sink to an ordinary spot on the ocean floor. And if you were standing at the average depth and looked up, you would see nothing. No light, no hint of the surface. Just blackness in every direction for more than 2 miles above you, pressing down with the weight of 368 atmospheres. The average depth of the ocean is not a gentle place. It is a crushing, freezing, lightless void, and it is the ordinary state of the planet we live on. Now, you might think of the deep ocean as a silent place, a place of stillness where nothing moves and nothing speaks. You would be wrong. The deep ocean is full of sound, and some of those sounds, even after decades of study, we cannot fully explain. Sound travels differently in water than in air, moving at about 1,000 to 500 meters per second in water, compared to about 343 meters per second in air, roughly 4.5 times faster. And at a depth of approximately 750 to 1,000 meters, there is a layer in the ocean called the SOFAR channel, which stands for sound fixing and ranging. In this layer, something remarkable happens. The slowing effect of cold temperature is exactly offset by the accelerating effect of increasing pressure, creating what physicists call a minimum sound speed layer. Sounds that enter this channel become trapped in it, bouncing back and forth, unable to escape, and they travel extraordinary distances with almost no energy loss. How extraordinary! In 1960, 130 kilograms of TNT was detonated off the coast of Perth, Australia, and the sound was detected 3.5 hours later near Bermuda on the other side of the planet. 20,000 kilometers. The SOFAR channel carried that sound wave halfway around the world. Scientists believe that baleen whales may deliberately dive to the depth of the SOFAR channel to sing, using it as a natural amplifier to send their calls across entire ocean basins. A whale off the coast of Antarctica could, in theory, be heard by another whale in the Arctic. Before human noise pollution from shipping, military sonar, and industrial activity began to flood the ocean with sound, whale calls traveling through the SOFAR channel could potentially have been heard from pole to pole. The entire ocean functioned as a communication network, a planet-spanning telephone system for whales, powered by nothing more than the physics of sound and water. Think about that for a moment. Before we came along with our engines and our propellers and our sonar, the ocean was a vast, quiet space in which a whale's song could travel the length of the earth. We have taken that from them, not deliberately, not maliciously, but we have taken it all the same. And then there are the sounds we cannot explain, or could not explain for a very long time. In 1997, NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory detected an ultra-low frequency, extremely powerful sound that sensors more than 5,000 kilometers apart picked up simultaneously. The source was triangulated to approximately 50 degrees south latitude, 100 degrees west longitude, in the remote southern Pacific, near what is known as Point Nemo, the most remote spot in the ocean. Farther from any land than any other point on Earth's surface. Scientists nicknamed the sound the bloop. When researchers first analyzed it, they noted that its acoustic signature matched the profile of a sound made by a living creature. But the source would have had to be far more powerful than any animal known to science, far more powerful than any blue whale, far more powerful than anything that has ever lived in the ocean, as far as we know. Media coverage ran wild with it, speculation about unknown sea monsters and undiscovered leviathans filled newspapers and websites and late-night television. People imagined something vast and ancient, lurking in the deepest parts of the southern Pacific, making sounds that shook the ocean floor. In 2008, NOAA confirmed that the bloop's acoustic signature actually matched that of an icequake, the sound of a large iceberg fracturing or scraping along the ocean floor. Similar sounds were recorded when iceberg A53A disintegrated near South Georgia Island. But here is what NOAA oceanographer Robert Ziak explained about why the mystery lasted so long. The bloop, as it was typically played back for the public, had been sped up to 16 times its normal speed. At that speed, it sounds organic, alive, like something breathing or calling or groaning. At normal speed, it sounds like what it is, the creak and shatter of ice. Other mysterious sounds have been recorded over the decades. Julia, detected on the 1st of March 1999, lasted about 2 minutes and 43 seconds and was powerful enough for the entire Pacific monitoring array to detect, and is now believed to be a large iceberg running aground near Antarctica. The slowdown, detected on the 19th of May 1997, gradually decreased in frequency over about 7 minutes and has also been attributed to ice. The upsweep has been detected since August 1991, when NOAA's monitoring system first came online, peaks seasonally in spring and autumn, and its source sits near an area of known volcanic and seismic activity in the South Pacific. It remains partially unexplained to this day. And then there is the 5.2 Hertz whale. First detected in 1989 by a Navy acoustician named Joe George, working at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island using the SOSUS submarine surveillance system, a whale that calls at 52 Hertz. That might not mean much unless you know that blue whales call at about 15 to 20 Hertz and fin whales at about 20 Hertz. 52 Hertz is far higher than either, a call that no known whale species makes. Marine scientist William Watkins at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution began tracking the 5.2 Hertz whale in 1992 and studied it until his death in 2004. The whale travels alone. Its migration patterns do not match those of any known species. No other whale has ever been confirmed to respond to its calls. It has been called the loneliest whale in the world. In 2010, multiple separated sensors detected what appeared to be similar 5.2 Hertz calls coming from different locations, which raised the possibility that there might be more than one. A 2021 documentary called The Loneliest Whale, executive produced by Leonardo DiCaprio, detected the call and visually cited a whale that appeared to be a bluefin whale hybrid, which is the current leading theory for the source of the signal. But we still do not know for certain what it is. Somewhere in the deep ocean, right now, tonight, a whale is calling at a frequency no other whale seems to hear. And it has been doing so for more than 35 years. I find that one of the loneliest facts in the natural world There is one more mystery of the deep ocean that I want to mention, because it connects to something we have already talked about: underwater brine pools. In the Gulf of Mexico, at about 1,000 meters depth, scientists discovered what they named the hot tub of despair in 2015. A pool roughly 100 feet across and 12 feet deep, sitting on the ocean floor like a lake within the ocean. The water inside runs 4 to 5 times saltier than normal seawater and about 19 degrees Celsius, much warmer than the near-freezing water around it. The density difference keeps it in place, not mixing with the surrounding ocean, and animals that stumble into it are often killed by the toxic chemistry and extreme salinity. The edges are littered with the remains of crabs and other creatures. The largest known brine pool is the Orca Basin in the Gulf of Mexico, roughly 120 square kilometers, anoxic, filled with methane and hydrogen sulfide, a dead zone at the bottom of the ocean. Then there are brinicles, sometimes called the ice fingers of death. When super cold, super salty brine leaks through cracks in sea ice, it sinks through the warmer seawater below and freezes the water around it, forming a hollow tube of ice that grows downward at several meters per day. When it reaches the seafloor, it spreads across the bottom, flash-freezing starfish and sea urchins in its path. The BBC first filmed them in 2011 for Frozen Planet in Antarctica and Milky Seas. Vast stretches of ocean surface, sometimes exceeding 100,000 square kilometers, glowing steadily with a milky white light at night. Bioluminescent bacteria, Vibrio havii, growing on algal blooms, coordinate their glow through quorum sensing. Satellite imagery first confirmed Milky Seas in 2005, and a 2019 event south of Java glowed for over 40 nights across 100,000 square kilometers. Between 1,915 and 1,993, there were 235 documented sailor sightings. The ocean is full of phenomena we are only beginning to understand. Now, I want to tell you about one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of biology. And it did not happen in a laboratory or on a distant planet. It happened at the bottom of the ocean. On the 17th of February, 1977, a team of scientists led by Jacques Piccard and Tjeerd van Andel descended to the Galapagos Rift in the eastern Pacific Ocean aboard the deep submersible Alvin. They were there to study hydrothermal vents, cracks in the ocean floor where water heated by volcanic activity deep in the Earth's crust shoots upward into the freezing ocean. They expected to find interesting chemistry, hot water, dissolved minerals, maybe some unusual rock formations. What they found was life. At a depth of about 2,500 meters, in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, they found an entire ecosystem that, according to everything scientists thought they knew about biology, should not have existed. Giant white clams, about 30 centimeters across, clustered around the vents. When Alvin returned to the same site in 1979, the team found something even more astonishing. Giant tube worms, Riftia pachyptilla, standing up to 2.4 meters tall, 8 feet, swaying gently in the warm current from the vents, in total darkness, with no connection whatsoever to the sun. Every other ecosystem on Earth, every forest, every grassland, every coral reef, every lake, depends ultimately on the sun, photosynthesis. Plants capture sunlight and turn it into food, and everything else eats the plants or eats something that ate the plants. That is how life works on Earth, or so we thought. These tube worms and clams lived on chemosynthesis. Bacteria at the base of their food chain converted hydrogen sulfide, a chemical that is toxic to most life on Earth, into usable energy. The energy came not from the sun above, but from the heat and chemistry of the Earth's interior below, an entirely independent way of powering life, one that had nothing to do with sunlight, nothing to do with photosynthesis, nothing to do with the world we knew. Since that first discovery, More than 500 active hydrothermal vent fields have been found around the world, supporting extraordinary creatures. The Pompeii worm, Alvinella pompeiana, can survive temperatures up to 80 degrees Celsius, making it one of the most heat-tolerant animals known. Eyeless shrimp sense the faint thermal glow of the vents through specialized organs. Snails carry shells reinforced with iron sulfide. Iron-shelled snails, living at the bottom of the sea. The discovery of hydrothermal vent ecosystems did more than add new species to the catalogue. It changed our understanding of where life can exist. If life can thrive at the bottom of the ocean, in total darkness, under enormous pressure, powered by chemical energy from the Earth's interior, then life could exist in similar environments elsewhere in our solar system. Jupiter's moon, Europa, carries a subsurface ocean beneath a shell of ice. Saturn's moon, Enceladus, shoots geysers of water vapor from its south pole, suggesting a warm ocean beneath. The hydrothermal vents at the bottom of our ocean are the strongest argument we have that life might exist on those worlds. And we discovered them 48 years ago. How many more such ecosystems might exist in the 73% of the ocean floor we have not yet mapped? In the 99.999% of the deep sea floor we have never visually observed. And here is something that puts the vent discovery in broader context. Before 1977, every biology textbook in the world taught that all life on Earth depends on the sun. Photosynthesis captures solar energy. Plants grow, animals eat the plants, predators eat the animals. The sun is the engine. Everything flows from the sun. The hydrothermal vents destroyed that assumption. They proved that life can exist independently of the sun, powered by chemical energy from the Earth's interior. This is not a minor footnote. It is a fundamental revision of our understanding of what life is and where life can exist. And the implications stretch far beyond our own planet. If life can exist at the bottom of our ocean, powered by geology rather than sunlight, then it could exist at the bottom of the ocean beneath Europa's ice shell, or in the subsurface water of Enceladus, or in any number of environments across the cosmos where liquid water meets geothermal energy. The hydrothermal vent discovery did not just change marine biology, it changed astrobiology. It changed the way we think about life in the universe. And it happened because a handful of scientists pointed a submersible at the ocean floor and went down to look. Now here is perhaps the most remarkable part of this entire story. After everything we have covered tonight, after all the dives and the measurements and the discoveries and the sacrifices, we have barely explored the ocean at all. As of June 2025, approximately 27.3% of the ocean floor has been mapped to modern standards, at a resolution of about 100 meters. That figure is up significantly from just 6% in 2017, when the Seabed 2030 project launched. Seabed 2030 is a collaboration between the Nippon Foundation and GEBCO, with data from more than 185 contributing organizations, aiming to map the entire ocean floor by 2030. But even with that remarkable progress, nearly 3/4 of the ocean floor remains unmapped at useful resolution. And mapping is not seeing. Mapping means bouncing sound waves off the bottom and creating a topographic picture which tells you the shape of the terrain but does not tell you what lives there. It does not show you the creatures, the ecosystems, the wrecks, the wonders. For that, you need cameras, you need eyes, human or mechanical, actually down there looking. A study published in the journal Science Advances in 2025 analyzed 43,681 submergence records from 34 institutions worldwide, covering all dives from 1958 to 2024. The researchers found that humans have visually observed only 0.001% of the deep sea floor. 0.001%. Their conclusion was that 66% of planet Earth, 2/3 of the planet we call home, remains entirely unseen by human eyes or human cameras. Now compare that to other bodies in our solar system. 100% of the Moon's surface has been mapped at high resolution, with much of it at 7-meter resolution or better. 100% of Mars has been mapped, with over 60% at 20-meter resolution. 98% of Venus was mapped by NASA's Magellan spacecraft. Our own ocean floor sits at 27.3% at 100 meters. We have better maps of Mars than we do of our own seabed. The craters and canyons of a planet that is, at its closest, about 55 million kilometers away, are more visible to us than what lies 10 kilometers beneath the surface of our own ocean. The reason is not a failure of will or ambition. It is physics. Water blocks almost everything we use to remotely sense surfaces. Visible light gets absorbed within a few hundred meters. Radar, the tool we use to map Mars and Venus and the Moon from orbit, cannot penetrate water. The only way to map the deep ocean floor in detail is with sonar, which requires ships to slowly, methodically crisscross the surface, sending sound waves down and waiting for the echoes to return. Each pass covers a relatively narrow strip of seafloor, and it has been estimated that a single survey ship, working continuously without pause, would need somewhere between 350 and 1,000 years to map the entire ocean floor at modern resolution. The estimated cost to complete the mapping with a fleet of ships falls somewhere between $3 and $5 billion. That sounds like a lot, but it is roughly the cost of 1 or 2 Mars missions. And here is where the funding comparison becomes stark. NASA's annual budget for space exploration runs approximately $25.4 billion. NOAA's total budget, covering everything from weather forecasting to fisheries management to ocean research, comes to about $6.1 billion. But NOAA's budget, specifically dedicated to ocean exploration, sits at only about $46 million. NASA's budget is roughly 550 times larger than NOAA's ocean exploration budget. The oceanographer Robert Ballard, the man who found the wreck of the Titanic, put it this way: NASA's annual budget for space exploration could fund NOAA's budget for ocean exploration for 1,600 years. Dr. Gene Feldman, a NASA oceanographer who has worked with satellite data for decades, said simply that we have better maps of the surface of Mars and the Moon than we do of our own ocean floor. And Sylvia Earle, the legendary marine biologist, the woman they call her deepness, has spent decades trying to change that. She said, "Even if you never have the chance to see or touch the ocean touches you with every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, every bite you consume." She also said this: "No water, no life, no blue, no green." And here is another thing that bothers me. We spend an enormous amount of money, time, and effort exploring space. And I want to be clear, I am not against space exploration. I think it is wonderful, and I think it is one of the noblest things our species does. But the gap between what we spend looking up and what we spend looking down is staggering. Consider this: the Perseverance rover, currently exploring Mars, cost approximately $2.7 billion. The James Webb Space Telescope cost about $10 billion. The Apollo program, adjusted for inflation, cost roughly $280 billion. These are extraordinary investments, and they have yielded extraordinary returns. But the entire ocean floor could be mapped at useful resolution for $3 to $5 billion, less than the cost of a single Mars rover mission. And yet we have not done it. We have mapped 100% of Mars and 100% of the Moon, and we have mapped 27.3% of our own planet's ocean floor. Sylvia Earle likes to say that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deep ocean. And she is right. We have more detailed topographic maps of a planet 225 million kilometers away than we do of the seabed beneath our own ships. I think there are several reasons for this. Space is visible. Space is glamorous. Space sits above us, and we can look up and see the stars and feel the pull of curiosity. The ocean is below us, and we cannot see it. Out of sight, out of mind. Space captures our imagination because we can see the moon and the planets and the Milky Way. The ocean captures nothing because from the surface, it looks like a flat blue plane extending to the horizon. There is no visual cue that anything extraordinary lies beneath. But it does, and the creatures that live there are, in many ways, as alien as anything we might find on Europa or Enceladus or any other world in our solar system. The difference is that they are here, right now, right beneath us, and many of them we have not yet found. Only about 240,000 of an estimated 1 to 2 million marine species have been described, and roughly 2,000 new species are found each year. At that rate, it would take us 880 more years to catalogue everything in the ocean. And by then, some of those species may already have gone extinct before we ever knew they existed. The Ocean Census has identified more than 866 new species in under 2 years. A new species of anglerfish, Gigantactis peresca, turned up in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone and was named among the top 10 new species of 2024. Mining tests in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, where there is growing commercial interest in deep-sea minerals, reduced biodiversity by 32%. In 2025, over 40 potential new species were found off Argentina. In 2024, the submersible Alvin was upgraded from 4,500 to 6,500 meters, opening 99% of the seafloor to human exploration. India's Matsya 6000 is targeting 6,000 meters by 2027. We are entering a new era of ocean exploration, but we are doing so just as the threats to the ocean are intensifying: deep-sea mining, plastic pollution, climate change warming the surface and altering circulation patterns, ocean acidification, dissolving the shells of tiny organisms at the base of the food chain. The race is on, and it is not clear we are winning it. And Earl is right, because the ocean is not some distant wilderness. It is the engine that runs the planet we live on. Let me explain what I mean by that. According to NOAA, between 50 and 80% of Earth's oxygen production comes from the ocean. Not from forests, not from grasslands, not from the Amazon, as important as the Amazon is. From the ocean, primarily from phytoplankton, those tiny, microscopic organisms that float in the sunlit surface waters and convert carbon dioxide into oxygen through photosynthesis, just like plants on land. One species in particular, a cyanobacterium called Prochlorococcus, is the smallest photosynthetic organism on Earth, so small that roughly 20,000 of them can be found in every single drop of seawater. And this one species alone produces approximately 20% of all the oxygen in the biosphere. You have never heard of it. You have never seen it. You could not see it without a microscope, and yet it helps keep you alive with every breath you take. Now, there is an important caveat here, and I want to be honest about it. While the ocean does produce an enormous amount of oxygen through photosynthesis, roughly the same amount gets consumed by marine life through respiration. So, the net contribution of the ocean to the atmosphere's oxygen in any given year is smaller than the gross production figure suggests. The oxygen you are breathing right now accumulated over many years. But the fact stands. The ocean is the planet's great chemical engine, cycling carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen on a scale that makes anything on land look tiny. The ocean also drives our weather. It absorbs vast quantities of heat from the sun, stores that heat, and distributes it around the globe through a system of currents. The thermohaline circulation, sometimes called the global ocean conveyor belt, is a planet-spanning system driven by differences in water temperature and salinity. Dense, cold, salty water sinks near Greenland and Iceland, and flows along the ocean floor heading south, eventually rounding Antarctica, moving into the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and upwelling, rising back to the surface primarily in the Southern Ocean and the North Pacific. Then it flows back along the surface as warm water, completing the circuit. The deep current moves at roughly 1 centimeter per second, and the full cycle takes approximately 1,000 to 2,000 years. Water that is sinking near Iceland right now will not resurface in the North Pacific for a millennium. The oldest deep waters on Earth are the ones that upwell in the North Pacific, having traveled the entire length of the Atlantic, around Antarctica, and across the Pacific floor over the course of 1,000 years or more. The ocean contains 97% of all water on Earth's surface and covers 71% of the planet, with a total volume of approximately 1.335 billion cubic kilometers. If you combine the water from all 5 Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario, you would have about 22,671 cubic kilometers, and the ocean is roughly 59,000 times larger than that. And if the Earth were a perfectly smooth sphere, with no mountains and no valleys and no continents, the ocean would cover the entire surface to a depth of approximately 2,686 meters, about 1.7 miles of water everywhere. Arthur C. Clarke is often credited with saying, "How inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it is quite clearly ocean." The exact origin of that quote is debated. Some historians trace it to the marine biologist Carlton Ray, who used similar phrasing in 1963, and it was first attributed to Clarke by James Lovelock in his 1979 book, Gaia. Whoever said it first, the point is perfect. This is not planet Earth, this is planet ocean. We just happen to live on the small percentage of its surface that sticks above the waterline. The ocean also hides some of the strangest physical phenomena on Earth. Deep ocean temperatures are remarkably uniform. Below the thermocline, which is the transition layer where surface warmth gives way to the cold deep, the temperature drops to between 0 and 3 degrees Celsius and stays there, regardless of latitude. The ocean at the bottom of the tropics holds the same temperature as the ocean at the bottom of the Arctic. Surface temperature averages about 17 degrees Celsius, but at 1,000 meters, it has already dropped to about 4 to 4.5 degrees, and at 4,000 meters, it sits between 0 and 3. 90% of the total ocean volume rests below the thermocline, in near-freezing water. And here is one more fact that I find extraordinary. A body that sinks to the deep ocean floor will not decompose the same way it would on land. In the deep, there are no insects and no exposure to air. Scavengers will consume the soft tissue relatively quickly, within weeks or months, depending on the depth and the availability of scavengers. But the skeleton will remain, because human bone is calcium phosphate, not calcium carbonate, and the deep ocean does not dissolve it. Bones have been found at great depths, preserved in the cold and the dark, sometimes for decades. This is not morbid speculation, it is important science. Understanding what happens to organic material in the deep ocean helps us understand nutrient cycling, carbon sequestration, and the ecology of the deep sea floor. Every body, whether it is a whale or a fish or anything else that reaches the bottom, becomes part of the deep ocean ecosystem. It feeds something, sustains something. In the deep ocean, nothing goes to waste. Everything that sinks is eventually consumed, recycled, reused. The deep ocean is the ultimate recycler. Jacques Cousteau understood this. He said, "From birth, man carries the weight of gravity on his shoulders. He is bolted to earth, but man has only to sink beneath the surface, and he is free." He also said, and I think this might be the most important thing any oceanographer has ever said, "We only protect what we love, we only love what we understand, and we only understand what we are taught." There is something I think about sometimes when I consider the deep ocean. Everything that dies in the upper ocean eventually sinks. Fish, jellyfish, whales, plankton. When they die, gravity pulls them downward, and they begin a slow descent through the water column toward the bottom. Most of this material falls as what oceanographers call marine snow. Tiny flakes of dead organisms, fecal pellets, shed mucus, decomposing fragments. Marine snow settles at about 100 to 200 meters per day, which means it takes weeks, sometimes months, for these particles to drift from the sunlit surface to the deep ocean floor. A slow, constant, invisible snowfall of death from above. That is the deep ocean's food supply. That is what sustains it. But sometimes, something larger falls. When a whale dies, its enormous body sinks, and depending on its size and the depth of the water, the carcass can take hours to reach the bottom. What it creates when it arrives is what marine biologists call a whale fall. A whale fall ranks among the most extraordinary ecological events in the deep ocean. A single whale carcass delivers as much organic carbon to the deep sea floor as would normally rain down on 1 hectare, about 2.5 acres, over 100 to 200 years. A feast in a place where food is desperately, chronically scarce. The first to arrive are the scavengers, sleeper sharks, hagfish, crabs. They descend on the carcass and consume the soft tissue, and this scavenger stage can last months or even years. Then come the enrichment opportunists, worms and crustaceans that colonize the bones and the surrounding sediment, feeding on the organic material that has soaked into the seafloor. And finally, in the sulfophilic stage, bacteria begin to break down the lipids still locked in the whale's bones, releasing hydrogen sulfide, which supports chemosynthetic bacteria similar to those found at hydrothermal vents. A single whale fall can support an entire deep-sea ecosystem for 50 to 100 years, a century of life from a single death. In the darkness, at the bottom of the ocean, a dead whale becomes a city, a world unto itself. Dozens of species that exist nowhere else have been found living exclusively on whale falls, waiting in the dark for the next carcass to arrive. And when it does, the cycle begins again. But whales are not the only things that sink to the bottom of the ocean. We have sent things down there too, things we did not intend to. On one of his dives in 2019, Victor Vescovo found a plastic bag and candy wrappers at approximately 10,928 meters at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench. The deepest point on Earth, and there was a plastic bag. A remotely operated vehicle called Kaiko, operated by Japan's Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, documented a single-use plastic bag at 10,890 meters, one of the deepest observations of human litter ever recorded. In 2018, researchers at Newcastle University examined amphipods, tiny crustaceans, sampled from 6 deep ocean trenches around the world, including the Mariana Trench, and found microplastics in the guts of 72% of them. The Chinese Academy of Sciences found concentrations of up to 2,000 microplastic pieces per liter of water in the most polluted regions of the Mariana Trench. And 89% of the plastic found in deep-sea debris databases worldwide is single-use: bags, wrappers, bottles, cups, used once and thrown away, and now they sit at the bottom of the ocean, in the guts of creatures that have been living in the deep since before human beings existed. 27 people have reached the bottom of the ocean, and so has our garbage. I do not know what to do with that fact, except to tell you about it and hope that it stays with you. Now, there is a common myth about bodies and the deep ocean that I want to address, because I know some of you are curious about it, and I want to give you the accurate answer. The claim is that the pressure of the deep ocean dissolves bones. This is not true. Human bone is made primarily of calcium phosphate, a mineral called hydroxyapatite, and it is chemically stable at all ocean pressures. The confusion comes from the calcium compensation depth, typically 4,200 to 5,000 meters, below which calcium carbonate dissolves. Calcium carbonate is what makes up the tiny shells of foraminifera and coccolithophores. But calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate are different compounds. The ocean dissolves microscopic shells made of one. It does not dissolve bones made of the other. A skeleton on the deep ocean floor, if undisturbed by scavengers, could persist for a very long time. Scavengers, of course, would not leave it undisturbed. In the deep ocean, any organic material that arrives gets consumed. Hagfish, amphipods, bacteria, they would strip the soft tissue within weeks or months. But the bones themselves would remain, held together by a chemical stability that even 1,100 atmospheres cannot overcome. I mention this because accuracy matters. The deep ocean is extraordinary enough without adding myths to it. Every fact in this video has been verified against NOAA, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the Smithsonian, Guinness World Records, and peer-reviewed scientific literature. When something is uncertain, I have told you so. When something is debated, I have told you that too. The ocean deserves our honest attention. It does not need exaggeration, it needs understanding. Now, despite how little of the ocean we have explored, the discoveries keep coming, and they are coming faster than ever before. The Ocean Census, a collaboration between the Nippon Foundation and Nekton, launched in 2023 and has already identified more than 866 new marine species in under 2 years. Think about that. More than 866 species that we did not know existed, found in less than 2 years. A new species of anglerfish, Gigantactis peresca, was discovered in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone in the Central Pacific and named among the top 10 newly discovered species of 2024. In 2025, more than 40 potential new species turned up off the coast of Argentina in the Mar del Plata Canyon. Overall, approximately 2,000 new marine species are formally described each year. 2,000 new species every single year, and we are not running out. Only about 240,000 of an estimated 1 to 2 million total marine species have been described so far, roughly 10 to 12%. Some estimates suggest that 91% of ocean species remain completely unknown to science. 91%. We have not even named them yet. We do not know they exist. They are out there, right now, in the dark, in the cold, in the pressure, and we have never seen them, never caught them, never photographed them, as unknown to us, as the creatures of another planet, and the tools to find them are getting better. In 2024, the legendary deep-sea research submersible Alvin, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, was upgraded from a maximum depth of 4,500 meters to 6,500 meters. That single upgrade opened up 99% of the ocean floor to human exploration, up from 68% before. For the first time in history, a regularly operating manned submersible can reach virtually any point on the ocean floor. India's Matsya 6000 submersible completed successful harbor trials and is targeting a 6,000-meter manned dive by 2027. China's submersible fleet has completed more dives than any other nation. Private companies are building new vessels. The era of deep ocean exploration is not ending, it is just beginning. But we are beginning late, very late. And with the pressures of climate change, deep-sea mining, pollution, and biodiversity loss all accelerating, the question is no longer whether we will explore the deep ocean. The question is whether we will explore it in time to understand what we are losing. And here is something that happened recently that I think is worth noting. Victor Vescovo, during his various deep ocean expeditions, discovered the 2 deepest shipwrecks in the world. The USS Johnston, a Fletcher-class destroyer that went down during the Battle off Samar in October 1944, was found at 6,456 meters in 2021. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, a destroyer escort from the same battle, was found at 6,895 meters in 2022. Both ships were lost in one of the most celebrated last stands in naval history, when a small group of American destroyers and escort carriers charged a vastly superior Japanese fleet to protect the landing forces at Leyte Gulf. The crews of those ships showed extraordinary courage, and their vessels now rest deeper than any other shipwrecks ever found. An estimated 3 million shipwrecks lie on the ocean floor worldwide. Most will never be found, sitting in water too deep or too remote for us to reach, held in the darkness, slowly being consumed by the sea, holding the stories of the people who sailed on them. The ocean is the world's largest graveyard and the world's largest museum, and almost no one has ever visited it. Before we close, there are a few more things I want to share with you, facts and stories that I think deserve to be told, because they add to the picture of how strange and wonderful and enormous the ocean really is. The deepest points in each of the 5 oceans were confirmed during Vescovo's 5 Deeps expedition. The Pacific holds Challenger Deep at 10,935 meters. The Atlantic holds the Milwaukee Deep in the Puerto Rico Trench at 8,376 to 8,408 meters. The Southern Ocean holds the Factorian Deep in the South Sandwich Trench at 7,432 meters. The Indian Ocean holds the deepest point of the Java Trench at 7,187 to 7,290 meters, and the Arctic holds the Malloy Deep at 5,550 to 5,669 meters. Every single one of these depths runs deeper than any mountain on Earth is tall, except Everest. There are things in the deep ocean that feel like they belong in a fairy tale. Underwater brine pools, for example. In the Gulf of Mexico, at about 1,000 meters depth, scientists discovered what they call the hot tub of despair, a pool about 100 feet across and 12 feet deep, sitting on the ocean floor like a lake within the ocean. The water inside runs roughly 4 to 5 times saltier than the surrounding seawater, and about 19 degrees Celsius, much warmer than the near-freezing water around it. The salt makes it denser, so it stays in place, refusing to mix with the ocean above. Animals that wander into it are often killed by the toxic chemistry, and the edges are littered with the remains of crabs and fish that ventured too close, a lake of death at the bottom of the sea. The largest known brine pool is the Orca Basin in the Gulf of Mexico, about 120 square kilometers, anoxic, meaning no oxygen, filled with methane and hydrogen sulfide, littered with carcasses. A dead zone within the deep ocean. Then there are brinicles, sometimes called ice fingers of death, which form beneath sea ice in polar regions when super cold, super salty brine leaks through cracks in the ice above. As the brine sinks through the warmer seawater below, it freezes the water around it, forming a hollow tube of ice that grows downward, sometimes at a rate of several meters per day. When it reaches the seafloor, it spreads out, flash freezing everything in its path, including starfish and sea urchins. The BBC first filmed brinicles in 2011 for their Frozen Planet series in Antarctica, and the footage is extraordinary. And then there are milky seas, vast stretches of ocean, sometimes exceeding 100,000 square kilometers, that glow steadily at night with a uniform, eerie, milky white light. Enormous colonies of bioluminescent bacteria, primarily Vibrio havii, growing on the surface of algal blooms, use a process called quorum sensing to coordinate their glow, lighting up simultaneously across thousands of square kilometers. Satellite imagery first confirmed milky seas in 2005. A 2019 event south of Java glowed steadily for more than 40 nights, covering more than 100,000 square kilometers. Sailors have reported these phenomena for centuries, with 235 documented sightings between 1915 and 1993. Milky seas remain one of the most spectacular and least understood phenomena in the ocean. And then there is something I want to address. because I know some of you are wondering about it. What happens to a human body in the deep ocean? A persistent myth holds that the pressure of the deep ocean would dissolve human bones. This is not true. Human bone consists primarily of calcium phosphate, a mineral called hydroxyapatite, which is stable at all ocean depths. The confusion arises from something called the calcium compensation depth, which typically falls between 4,200 and 5,000 meters. Below this depth, calcium carbonate, the material that makes up the shells of microscopic marine organisms like foraminifera and coccolithophores, does dissolve. But calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate are chemically different. The deep ocean dissolves tiny shells. It does not dissolve human bone. The pressure would certainly kill you instantly, but your skeleton would survive on the ocean floor, potentially for a very long time. I mention this because accuracy matters, especially when we are talking about a subject this vast and this poorly understood. There are enough genuine wonders in the deep ocean without adding myths to them. Let me give you the numbers one final time, because I think, after everything we have covered tonight, they will land differently now than they did at the beginning. The average depth of the ocean is 3,682 meters, deeper than 8 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. And that is just the average. The typical depth, the ordinary floor. The deepest point, Challenger Deep, reaches 10,935 meters. Place Mount Everest at the bottom, and 2,086 meters of water would still cover its peak. More than a mile of ocean above the tallest mountain on Earth. Pressure at Challenger Deep reaches approximately 1,100 atmospheres, roughly 15,750 pounds per square inch, 8 tons on every square inch of surface. 50 jumbo jets stacked on a single person. A styrofoam cup shrinks to the size of a thimble. 97 to 98% of the ocean's total volume exists in permanent darkness. It has never seen the sun. 76% of deep-sea creatures produce their own light. Among jellyfish, that figure climbs above 97%. Only about 27 people have ever reached the deepest point on Earth. More than 642 have traveled to space. 12 walked on the moon. Over 4,000 summited Everest. 27.3% of the ocean floor has been mapped at modern resolution. 100% of Mars has been mapped. 100% of the Moon. 98% of Venus. 0.001% of the deep seafloor has been visually observed by human eyes or cameras. 66% of planet Earth remains entirely unseen. NASA's annual budget runs 550 times larger than NOAA's dedicated ocean exploration budget. Robert Ballard noted that NASA's budget could fund NOAA's ocean exploration for 1,600 years. An estimated 91% of all ocean species remain completely undiscovered and undescribed. A single whale carcass sustains a deep-sea ecosystem for 50 to 100 years. And here are the deepest points in each ocean, confirmed during Vescovo's 5 Deeps expedition. Pacific, Challenger Deep, 10,935 meters. Atlantic, Milwaukee, deep in the Puerto Rico Trench, 8,376 to 8,408 meters. Southern, Factorian, deep in the South Sandwich Trench, 7,432 meters. Indian, the deepest point of the Java Trench, 7,187 to 7,290 meters. Arctic, Malloy Deep, 5,550 to 5,669 meters. Every one of these depths, except the Arctic, runs deeper than any mountain on Earth is tall, other than Everest. The average depth of the ocean, 3,682 meters, stands 4.4 times greater than the average elevation of land, which comes in at about 840 meters. The ocean is, by every measure, far grander in scale than the land we live on. One more comparison. The Titanic wreck sits at 3,800 meters. The Mariana Trench reaches 10,935. That makes the Mariana Trench nearly 3 times deeper than the site that destroyed the Titan submersible. And the pressure at Challenger Deep nearly 3 times the pressure that crushed 5 people in less than 20 milliseconds. The ocean's scale is not just large, it is compounding. Every number we have covered tonight has another, larger number waiting behind it. There is plastic at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And somewhere in the deep ocean, right now, tonight, a whale is singing at 52 hertz, at a frequency no other whale seems to hear. And it has been doing so, alone, for more than 35 years. So let us come back to where we started. A swimming pool, 2 meters deep, warm, bright, safe. We have traveled from that swimming pool to the bottom of the world tonight. We passed through the zone where colors disappeared, where reds and oranges were swallowed by the blue. We passed through the zone where light faded and died, where the last photon of sunlight was absorbed and the eternal darkness began. We felt the pressure build from 1 atmosphere to 10, to 100, to over 1,000, until it crushed steel submarines faster than a nerve impulse could fire. We met creatures that make their own light in a world that has never seen the sun. Creatures that fuse their bodies together. Creatures that see through transparent heads. Creatures that live on chemical energy from the Earth's interior with no connection to the sun at all. We followed the brave to the deepest point on the planet, the bathysphere pioneers of the 1930s, Piccard and Walsh in the Trieste, Cameron alone in his torpedo, Vescovo to the bottom of every ocean. And we followed the foolish, too, into a vessel that the ocean crushed in less time than it takes to blink. And here is what I keep coming back to. The ocean is right here, not in another galaxy, not on another planet, not light years away. It is beneath the fishing boats and the cargo ships and the cruise liners and the aircraft carriers, beneath the surfers and the swimmers and the children building sandcastles on the beach. The deepest, darkest, most extreme environment on Earth, a place more alien than the surface of Mars, sits directly beneath the waves that lap at our feet when we walk along the shore. We live on a water planet. The ocean covers 71% of the surface, contains 97% of the water, produces a vast proportion of the oxygen we breathe, drives our weather, regulates our climate, and feeds billions of people. It holds life forms we have not yet discovered, ecosystems we have not yet visited, landscapes we have not yet seen. It is the blue heart of this world, and it beats beneath us every single day, circulating warmth and life and chemistry across the globe, sustaining us in ways we barely understand. Sylvia Earle put it better than anyone. She called the ocean the blue heart of the planet, and she is right. She also said, no water, no life, no blue, no green. And Cousteau, who spent more time in the sea than almost anyone who ever lived, left us with perhaps the most urgent words of all. We only protect what we love, we only love what we understand, and we only understand what we are taught. That is what tonight has been about. Teaching, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. Because here is the final thing I want to leave you with. The deep ocean is not just a collection of facts and numbers and record-breaking dives. It is not just creatures with transparent heads and whales that sing alone. It is the largest living space on Earth, and it is the least protected. International waters, the high seas, cover roughly 40% of the planet's surface, and for most of history, they have had almost no legal protection whatsoever. The High Seas Treaty, adopted by the United Nations in 2023, marked a landmark step toward protecting marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, but enforcement remains a challenge. And the treaty has not yet been ratified by enough countries to come into force. Meanwhile, the deep ocean faces growing threats. Deep-sea mining companies want to harvest polymetallic nodules from the abyssal plains, minerals that took years to form and that support ecosystems we are only beginning to understand. Plastic pollution continues to accumulate in the deepest trenches. Climate change is altering ocean temperatures, chemistry, and circulation patterns in ways that are difficult to predict and impossible to reverse quickly. The deep ocean does not have a voice. It does not have a constituency. It does not vote. It does not tweet. It exists in silence, in darkness, in cold, in pressure, and it asks nothing of us. But it gives us almost everything: oxygen, climate stability, biodiversity, the cycling of nutrients that sustains the global food web. Sylvia Earle said the next 10 years may be the most important in the next 10,000 years. I believe her. And Arthur C. Clarke, or perhaps Carlton Ray, or perhaps someone else entirely, said something that I think should be the last thing you hear tonight. How inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it is quite clearly ocean. We have explored almost none of it. We have mapped less than a third of its floor. We have seen less than 1,000%. We have identified barely 1/10 of the species that call it home. The greatest frontier on Earth is not above us, it is below us. And it has been there all along, waiting for us to look down. If you enjoyed this video, and if it changed the way you think about the world beneath the waves, I would be grateful if you would consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It is a small thing, but it helps more than you know. It helps us continue making these videos, continue exploring these topics, and continue sharing the stories that the deep ocean has to tell. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. Thank you for your patience and your curiosity and your willingness to think about things that most people never consider. I hope the journey was worth it. I hope the numbers stuck. And I hope that the next time you stand at the edge of the sea and look out at that flat, calm surface stretching to the horizon, you will think about what lies beneath it. Miles of darkness, thousands of atmospheres of pressure, creatures that glow in the black